Great. All right, everyone. So as I told you, I'm a veterinarian, but I'm also a United States Pony Club National Examiner. I've been an equine veterinarian for almost 40 years. And I'm also on the National Testing and Curriculum Committee for the United States Pony Club. So that's a little bit about where I come from. You can change the slide now. Okay, so, oops.
Sorry.
Okay, so what is a conditioning schedule? So a conditioning schedule has a couple things to it. Keep going back and forth. It's a plan to bring a horse from one plane of fitness to another, and hopefully doing so without injuring the horse. It's a device to measure that improved fitness as you're going along, and it's a means to communicate between individuals working together to improve the fitness of the horse. So that way, if you have somebody else who's also working with your horse, a groom, another rider or whatever, that they do the proper level of exercise on any given day. Okay, you can switch. So what are the test expectations at the HA and HB? Do we have any HAs out there, or are we all HBs?
I think just HBs right now.
Okay. So at the HA, you're going to prepare an 8-week conditioning plan designed to prepare the horse for a specific activity, competition, or a rehabilitation. And it needs to include all of those things that are on there. And the details should be possible ongoing therapies should be given. The HB, since that's the one we're going to be talking about mostly tonight, that is very specific. We want a 6 to 8 week conditioning and feeding program designed to get an unfit but healthy horse in shape for ordinary daily riding as defined on page 229 of the C manual. So what we're talking about is taking a horse that, let's say you live someplace where it's cold, and the horse was off for the months of January and February because it was too cold to ride and too much snow. This is going to be getting that horse back into riding so that you could go to lessons and start preparing to go to dressage shows, events, whatever kind of hunter shows, whatever you happen to do. But we're not talking about getting a horse fit for any specific thing. We're just talking about for ordinary daily riding. So what we mean by that is probably your average taking them out, warming them up for 5 to 10 minutes, riding them for a half an hour, then cooling them down for another 5 to 10 minutes and putting them away. And that's what we're talking about by ordinary daily riding. That plan has to include a description of the mount. So it needs to be like age, breed, fitness, body score. And now, of course, we know in this situation, current fitness level will be unfit. The amount of work and type of work to be done, it should have at least 1 day off a week, and it should demonstrate an understanding of basic conditioning principles. And what we're talking about there are those things that we have on the cards, talking about things like skill drills and talking about interval training and talking about inversion and things like that, things that they're on the cards that are your basic conditioning principles. Again, these will be outlined in your C manual and in your the HB or the BA manual. Both have sections on conditioning that will have those types of things in it. So that's the first thing you've got to do as an HB is do it for that 6 to 8 week program for getting an unfit but healthy horse in shape for ordinary daily riding. No other programs are what we're looking for. We only want that one. Okay, you can change the slide. Okay. So what do you have to do when you're thinking about making these schedules? There are certain parameters we need to worry about. So again, what's the current level of fitness? That will be unfit in that HB horse. What's the health status? We already know that's a healthy horse. So those two things are already answered for you. You should write them down on your report, on your description, but those things are already determined. has the horse been fit in the past? That will make a difference in how you're going to fit a horse up in the future, because this horse is unfit, but has it ever been fit? Because a horse that was fit, let's say back in October, November, before you gave them the winter off, is going to be much easier to fit up than a horse who is never been fit in his whole life, or has only been fit for, let's say, walk trot trail rides, and never done any kind of real competition. So you may be able to progress a little quicker with a horse that has been fit in the past. Again, is there any kind of injuries or anything like that in this situation for the HB? That answer will be no. There are no injuries, no pre-existing ailments, unless you have something that you want to just add in for yours. But again, we said it was a healthy horse, so it can't be anything too pre-existing. What's the horse's age? That can be something, a parameter that you have control over. Younger horses, as you know, with younger people, fit up much quicker than older horses. And so you're going to be able to do it much faster progression if you're working on a 5 or 6 year old horse than if you're working on a 15-year-old horse. What's the horse's breeding? Thoroughbreds and Arabians, things that are hot-blooded horses, they become fit much faster than your average Welsh pony or warm blood or draft cross type. They're going to be slower to become fit, and that's just because of the makeup of the muscling of those horses and the natural muscling of those horses. Then things you're going to think about is availability of terrain. Is there hills in your areas, different types of footing, water for exercising, and all of those things could help fit the horse up more quickly than if you're having to work, just let's say you're living in Florida and you have sand and it's flat. Well, it really limits what you can do. So it's going to probably take a little longer to fit a horse up down in those situations. What is the horse's body condition score? And that's something very important to know, because the horse is unfit, but that doesn't mean he's fat. So a really thin horse or a really fat horse is going to take longer to fit up than a horse that's at optimal weight, which would be a body condition score of 5. Again, those body condition score charts are in your, I believe it's in the C manual, but it's basically 5 is your average horse that is in good shape. Going up to 7 or 8 would be a really fat horse. Going down to a 3 would be a really thin horse. So you can figure out what the body condition score is of the horse that you're working with, and that'll have some parameter, make some difference in the parameters you're going to use. And then something to, again, be thinking about for your more upper level type things is, what is the rider's level of ability? Because a skilled rider is going to be much more in tune with when the horse is becoming fatigued, and is going to keep optimal balance over the horse and judge speeds more accurately. So those people are going to be able to fit the horses up better and faster than somebody who doesn't really have the ability to ride and to make these judgments the way a skilled rider can. Okay, we can switch slides. So our steps in developing that conditioning schedule: once you've defined the horse and the goal, now you start working on the plan. So you need to determine the length of time you need to reach the goal. Make sure that the plan fits the horse, not the horse fits the plan. If the plan has a specific competition goal, it's easier to work backwards from that event date. But again, this is not what you're doing in the HB test. You're going to be just taking that unfit horse up to daily riding. We always have to be aware that cardiovascular fitness occurs faster than musculoskeletal strengthening. So if the horse has never been fit or has been laid off for extended period of times, the progress will need to be slower to allow for the bones, ligaments, and tendons to strengthen properly so that we don't injure the horses. So when returning from an injury, the plan will need to progress slower to prevent re-injury. But again, this is not what you're doing with the HB plan. You're going to determine the number of days the horse will be exercised per week, and that number needs to vary based on the rider's availability or the horse's availability. If you're leasing a horse, you might only have 3 days a week to ride it, and that's all you can ride that horse. Or if you're working full-time or going to school full-time, you may not be able to ride 5 or 6 days a week. So your plan will need to be for what you can realistically be able to get out there and ride the horse. So that's always something we need to keep in mind. Okay, and go ahead and change. So we're going to determine how many days will be schooling and training days, how many days will be conditioning days, and how many days will be rest days. Remember that an unfit horse is going to start out with more conditioning and fewer schooling days until you get that base of condition is built. So that may mean that you just start out with the unfit horse of doing a lot of walking with a little bit of trotting interspersed there for the first week or two. That may be all you're doing, is just getting that base of conditioning under them by just taking them out and walking them. Determine the current temperature, pulse, and respiratory parameters for rest and whatever exercise is appropriate for that horse at the time. So you're going to want to start out on the first days that you're doing, and you're going to take that TPR at rest before you start riding them. And then you're going to do another TPR after you do whatever exercise is appropriate. And again, for the horse that's totally unfit, that may be taking him for an hour walk. And so, but you take it within 10 to 20 seconds of the end of the appropriate maximal intensity work. So as soon as you finish walking them, then you jump off, take their TPR, and then take it during cooling out about every 5 to 10 minutes. And then you can put all that data on a chart so that you can track their progress as things improve. Most schedules are based on a week at a time because that's the easiest way to do it. And most schedules will have at least 1 to 2 days of rest during the week. And again, rehab schedules may have hand walking or under saddle walking days, since that's a low impact exercise. Okay, go ahead. For the average schedule, it'll take 5 to 6 days of exercise, because that's what we usually think about when we think about conditioning schedules. But again, that has to be something that you're able to do. And then you break them up into conditioning days and schooling days. Again, for those unfit horses, they may just start out being all conditioning days for that first week or two. And during those times, you're going to be improving their cardiovascular, respiratory, and muscular fitness by using things like the long, slow distances. So that's our first thing that we use to develop any kind of conditioning in a horse, is just long, slow distances. And that, again, may start out being just doing something like taking them out for a half an hour to an hour, just a walk, and just walking them. Hopefully you have a little bit of terrain to work with, not anything too steep or too difficult for the horse, but hopefully maybe some rolling hills or something like that. And then that is where you're going to start out with doing. If the horse has been fit in the past, then you may be, if you're like doing for the HA, where you're doing something for a specific thing, you may start with the interval training. Those are things like your interval sets, trot sets, and canter sets. Speed play will be things you're doing when you're trying to develop that cardiovascular fitness for doing gallops or quick turns or things like that. If you're doing, like, let's say, playing polo cross, you're going to need to work on those fast turns and sprinting. And then cross training is also very important, and that can be doing things like going out and taking a dressage horse out and doing some trot sets with them, or taking a dressage horse and doing some cavaletti work, or taking a show hunter and going out and doing some trail riding, or maybe even doing some water exercise in water, because those are all good things for building up muscles. But there's, all different kinds of things you can do with cross training. But again, remember, cardiovascular is going to develop faster than musculoskeletal, so you can't progress too quickly. Schooling days will be working on muscular strength, flexibility, coordination, and agility. And those are things like your skill drills. So practicing doing walk to halts or halt to walks to begin with, maybe some rainbacks, maybe some walking lateral work, such as leg yielding, cavaletti type cross training, things like that. And then exercises develop core strength. Backing up is a really good one for core strength. Of course, our stretches for carrot stretches and belly lifts and all of those can all be used for core strength. And then suppling exercises like doing circles and serpentines, things like that. And again, even when you're starting with a horse that's totally unfit, you can start working on 20-meter circles and 3-loop serpentines, and doing walking over poles. All of those things can be very helpful in developing these horses, but is not going to be high impact or damaging to them. So you can start those sorts of things out that first week. A program should address the concepts of peaking and tapering prior to a goal if applicable. That's not something you have to worry about in a HB program, because again, we're not getting ready for anything specific. We're just trying to get them to the point we can ride them every day. Okay, go ahead to the next one. Okay, so you're going to choose the exercises you're going to be using. Long, slow distances, as I said, that's how you develop your base of fitness. So that's going to be done mostly at the walk, maybe a little bit of trot after a while. You can do them at a canter with a horse that's fit, but certainly that's not going to be in this situation for the HB. And all programs with unfit horses start with long, slow distances. That's our base of conditioning. Interval training, that's usually once you get going, that'll be in your unfit horse. You might start those on the 3rd week, doing 1 to 2 days per week. Again, with an unfit horse, you're going to mean just starting to walk and doing walk trot intervals of short duration. Maybe you'll do 5 minutes of walk and a minute of trot, and then back to 5 minutes of walk, a minute of trot, that sort of thing. And then semi-fit horses, we start moving up to that old 6-3-1, the 6 minutes of walk, 3 minutes of trot, 1 of canter. And then you work upward from there until you get to be able to do whatever it happens to be for galloping. For lower level eventing, you might do 4 to 5 minutes of galloping. And by the time you get to with upper level eventing, they may be doing upwards of 10 and 11 minutes of galloping to get these horses really fit. But the goal is, with the recovery walk, is to always get that heart rate down of 120 or less before starting the next trot and canter interval. So what we're talking about is getting that horse back down into a situation where the heart rate indicates that the horse is now in a aerobic exercise situation, not in staying in an anaerobic, because any horse that is cantering or galloping of any speed is going to end up with a heart rate well over 120, and that is going to be getting into the anaerobic phase. Certainly by 150, all horses are in anaerobic energy production, and so we want to make sure we're down below 120 so that we can then build back up again. The very fit horse may be able to reduce the walk sessions down to just 4 or 5 minutes at a time and achieve that heart rate. But in your unfit horse, it may take 10 minutes of walking before you can go back to the trot or the canter. Skill drills, those are your specific to your discipline. The horse is being trained for. It's jumping, dressage movements, fast turns and lead changes for polo crossing games, things like that. Doing cross-country jumping, all of those sorts of things would be all skill drills. Okay, we can switch slides. Speed play, those are your brief sprints, random turns. Those develop agility, responsiveness, balance, coordination, all of those things. They're very important for disciplines that require quick responses. So various terrains can also be used to test the horse and be able to further develop those skills. And then also you can use like hills and water and all of those things to make sure the horse has mastery. Cross training, those are using the exercises from different disciplines to help further the musculoskeletal and cardiovascular fitness. And as I talked about before, jumping dressage horses, fox hunting, an event horse, things like that. All of these things are referenced in the USPC Advanced Manual, the BA Manual, and the Intermediate Manual, the C Manual. So you can see all of those things further in there. Okay, and let's go ahead and go to the next one. Strength training. Those are training that is required to build specific muscle groups and reduce fatigue. So in dressage, collection is one of the biggest ways we develop strength. Working on hills and various footings, exercising in water, such as doing like Boyd Martin has a big water, circular water, I don't know what you'd call it, pond, if you will, that he takes horses in and exercises them in just for that purpose. Jumping small fences would be strength training. Show jumpers, we're going to use grids and courses. We're going to increase jump heights and widths. We're going to decrease distances between the jumps to make the horse compress more between fences. So all of those things could be considered strength training. Eventers, you're going to do all of the above, plus you're going to add banks and steps and fences and on slopes or in water. Polo crossing games, you're going to do a lot of interval training for cardiovascular development, speed play, skill drills, and all that to increase agility. And you could also again use the water exercise for muscle building along with terrain. Okay, we can switch. Flexibility, you could do passive or dynamic flexibility. Passive, we're talking about our carrot stretches, tail pulls, all those sorts of things. Dynamic would be your lateral movements, circles, serpentines, counterflexions, bending, all of those things are going to help with flexibility of your horse. Core muscle development, and those are going to be required for specific, specific exercises to develop them. So we can use increased levels of collection that helps to develop their core. We can use exercise bands around their behinds that come from the saddle or saddle pads around their behinds. You can use things like the Pessoa lunging equipment that can all help increase it. Hill work certainly helps to increase your core muscle. You can do passive exercises like your belly lifts and pelvic flexions, and you can do raised cavaletti. That's really helpful for developing core muscles, is raising the cavallettis up maybe 2 or 3 to 4 inches higher off the ground to make the horse utilize his hind legs and bringing the hind legs up and forward instead of just forward. Backing up, that's an excellent way to do core muscle development. You can do that whether you're on them or off of them. Backing up is going to help either way. Turns on forehand and haunches are excellent for core muscles, and exercising in water. And another one that I've been recently hearing a lot about is using the theraplates help with core muscles, because they help develop the specific multifidus muscle, which is one of the muscles that strengthens and helps the back. They basically run along the dorsal spinous processes just under your saddle and from the withers back to the haunches. And developing those muscles is really important for helping horses have better core muscle use and strength. And so theraplates can be really helpful for those as well. Okay, you can change that. So how are we going to monitor the vital signs and keep records? You can be as low tech as fingers feeling for a pulse. You can watch the horse breathe, and you can write them down on a calendar, all the way up to sophisticated heart monitors, phone apps. Anything will work. The key is whatever you choose, you need to use it. It doesn't do you any good to have one of these fancy heart rate monitors like I've listed on there, or the belts or girth sleeves or things like that, if you never use them. So whatever it is you choose to use, you just need to get good at it and use it on a regular basis when you do the conditioning days on your horses. Certainly monitors are wonderful to have, but they're not a necessity to have. Just be getting good at it is what is really important, and keeping the records. Okay, we can change the slide. So dietary considerations. Water will always increase as a horse increases their conditioning, because they will be using it in evaporative cooling. So in other words, they're going to be sweating, they're going to have increased metabolism, they're going to have muscle building. So all of those things are going to cause them to utilize more water. So they're going to drink more water. So that definitely is something you have to think about, is the fact that you need to provide the horse with more water. Certainly climate, season, and diet will also highly influence the water consumption. Okay, next slide. Protein. Protein is definitely increased during the horse's time when they are being conditioned. Because they're going to be building muscle, they have to have increased protein. But depending on what they're currently getting and the quality of the protein, they may not need as much increase as you might think they do. Many diets for performance horses have protein levels of 12 to 14%, as you can see there. And that's adequate for all horses except ones that are in extreme level of work. And that would be your race horses or your really, really high level performance horses. Older or younger horses may require more protein because they're also either growing during the time that they're being conditioned, or they may have diminished absorption in the case of the older horse. And so they may have to have a little higher. So you might be up to the 14 to 16% on protein on those horses. A working horse is going to require high quality proteins and increased amounts of the essential amino acid. So you need to look at lysine content, because it's a good measure of the quality of protein in a feed. And now it's often listed on labels, and it certainly is something you can get it by having your hay tested, is finding out the quality of the protein. You have to realize any excess protein you get is going to be eliminated or used as energy. So it's much cheaper to feed horses carbohydrates and fats if you're needing energy. And luckily, we don't have to worry too much about kidney function in horses, because that's not a real big problem. But you have to be a little concerned if you have an older horse or a horse that's receiving medications like the NSAIDs, that would be bute, banamine, diclofenac, things like that, because those horses could have kidney problems, and that could be hard on them if they're also having to eliminate a lot of the protein via the kidneys. Okay, we can change slide. Fats are an excellent source of the calories that you're going to need to fuel exercise. They do require more energy to utilize than carbohydrates, but they do cause they don't cause increased insulin levels, which is really good for the horse. They're very important in obese horses or horses that are prone to insulin dysregulation, because those horses we don't want to feed high levels of carbohydrates to. So that's something to be thinking about if your horse happened to have that problem. Again, the horses you're dealing with at the HB level, you don't have to worry about that, because those are considered healthy horses. Fats do have 2.5 times the energy level of carbohydrates or proteins, and they're very economical, and you can certainly use any of the oils. A lot of people are tending away from corn oil because of all of the concern that corn oil has higher levels of omega-6 fatty acids in it, and so they've gone more towards like the canola oils and things like that. But again, if you just are looking to add some fat to your horse's diet, there's lots of different ways to do so, and corn oil is certainly acceptable in many programs. We can change the slide. Carbohydrates, again, something that's going to increase during most conditioning programs, unless the horse is obese to start with or has a metabolic problem. They supply the energy in a fast and efficient manner. The horse will requiring the increase of calories every week, but it's not practical to often to change that ration that often. So usually we change them like once a month or once every 3 weeks. And that way we will keep up with their increasing work. Most often the grain portion of the diet is the carbohydrate rich portion, and that is the part that's increased unless your horse is an easy keeper, in which case you may choose to use a carbohydrate source like hay, your forages, or something like beet pulp, which is also another type of forage. And those should always be no less than 50% of the diet, that fiber source. And we usually increase them in the range of 10 to 25% per month. And that's about all the horse would need while they're getting fitter. So you could do this also, instead of changing by weight, you could change from a low carb product to a moderate carb product. So that way you don't have to change the amount of grain that the horse is getting. You're just changing the type of grain that it would get, and that can be done gradually over that 3 to 4 week period of time, so that you don't have to worry about any kind of problems with the horse from changing his diet too quickly. All right, we can change the slide. Vitamins. Vitamins are your fat soluble or water soluble types. And the only ones that have been identified to be needed in increased amounts during exercise are vitamins E, C, B1, and B2. That's it. All the rest of them, whatever a horse at maintenance gets, a horse in work should get. And most of these are going to be supplied in your feed mix because they put vitamin premixes into them. But if the horse is not being fed any kind of a premix, if he's just on hay, you may want to give them a supplemental vitamin and mineral mix so that you're being sure that they're getting proper amounts. So also, if you're feeding a feed where you're giving them less than the amount per body weight listed on the label, you may need to supplement them there, because every horse feed is made to be fed. Let's say if you have a 1,000-pound horse, it may say on there that you need to be feeding 6 pounds a day of that food. And if you're only feeding 2 pounds of that food, then that horse is not getting the vitamin premix in the amount that he should be getting it in. So you have two options at that point. You can either choose to go ahead and find a different food that you can feed the amount listed on the label, or you can add a vitamin and mineral premix to it, and that way you will be sure that the horse is getting enough. So vitamin E is found in the leafy green forage. So if the horse is on grass or recently cut hay, they should be getting plenty of it. If they're not, then you may want to go ahead and supplement your vitamin E. And then horses that are healthy, and again, that horse that we're doing that HB schedule for is a healthy horse. They are going to produce enough of the vitamin C and vitamin B1 and B2 on their own, and so they won't need to be supplemented with more. Okay, we can go ahead and
Quick question. Can you talk a little bit about ration balancers, because they seem to be very popular right now, but I'm not sure if that's a good way to go or not.
I'll tell you, I am not as happy with ration balancers as I used to be. I used to think they were the real wonderful thing, but I'll be honest with you, in my own experience with my clients' horses and with my own older horse who had some metabolic issues, I started having more problems with him once I put him on ration balancers. So he started becoming laminitic, and I've seen that in other people's horses. I think the protein levels in these ration balancers are really too high for what these horses need, in addition to what they're getting in their hay and their grain, grass. So I think you have to be very careful when feeding these ration balancers, because I think that the idea behind them is great, but I think they need to be worked on further because I certainly have seen it in quite a few horses now where they have had more problems when we put them on the ration balancers than they were doing on eating small quantities of grain and a good quality hay. I just think we have to be really careful with them.
Thank you.
Sure, we can go to the next slide. Minerals, of course, calcium, phosphorus are essential to bone development and maintenance. Exercise can increase those demands, so we need to make sure that they're getting plenty of calcium and phosphorus in their diet. If they're on any kind of a grain diet, they will certainly be getting plenty of phosphorus because that's going to be in high levels in any grains. Calcium is going to be in high levels if they have any of your legumes, so your alfalfa, clover, anything like that will be high levels in their hay. Certainly most of your grains are going to have both calcium and phosphorus are going to be very carefully balanced in those grain mixes. So, that's something you can certainly have no trouble making sure the horse is getting plenty of those by either adding some alfalfa to their diet if you feel like their existing hay is not that great a quality. That can be done either through alfalfa pellets or alfalfa meal or alfalfa cubes or any of that sort of thing. You can just add some of that or like a flake of alfalfa hay along with their other hay. Is one of the easiest ways to add some calcium to their diet if you feel like they need it because your hay is not of the best quality. Electrolytes, of course, are going to be needed, and those are going to be your sodium, chloride, and potassium because those are the major components of sweat. So they're, of course, going to need it if they're being exercised on a regular basis. So you're going to need to look at the diet and figure out whether you need to be adding electrolytes. Certainly, if you're in a hot area and you're exercising this horse regularly during the summertime and he is sweating or she is sweating a great deal, then I would certainly consider adding a electrolyte mix to my horse's feed on a regular basis. But in any case, all horses should have access to the white salt blocks and an equine specific mineral block. And when I talk about an equine specific mineral block, I'm not talking about the trace mineral blocks. I'm talking about one that is specifically made for equine. The trace mineral blocks, in my opinion, are a waste of money and a waste of time because they don't have enough trace minerals to ever do your horse any good. And the minerals may make the horse not eat or lick enough of the salt. And so therefore they may be put off by licking enough salt. So you really want to have the white salt block and then something like a Purina 1212 block is one of the equine specific blocks, or you can find a lot of them that are made by the different other feed companies in your area if you ask them for a specific equine mineral block. But again, and the mineral blocks, the great thing is those feeds companies that are in your area may have one that is designed for your geographic area and therefore would be the best at preventing any deficiencies. But you definitely do not want to think that those red trace mineral blocks are really of any value. They really aren't. So you might as well just go with the white salt block. And then if you need further ones, then go with, like, again, the Purina 1212 or one of the other ones that are similar to that. Okay, let's go on.
Okay, I'm full of questions tonight. Sorry.
No,
Is there such a thing as too much electrolytes? We have a horse who loves his electrolyte water, but man, he will go through a bucket in like a 5-gallon bucket in 5 minutes. Like,
yeah.
How much should they have?
Basically, you could look on the container and see what it says as a daily dose. And if they drink it all down at one dose, because some of them like the taste of it. And the ones that you got to watch ones that have any sugar or flavorings in them, because sometimes that's going to increase the horse's intake of it more than he needs to. But any of these products should be labeled as to what they need out of it. And the one I like the best is called Summer Games Electrolyte. And that was designed specifically after they did a bunch of research for the games that we had in the Olympic Games that we had in Atlanta. They did a lot of research before that because we realized that we were going to have problems with horses in that summer heat. And so they really looked into exactly what the components of horses' sweat are, and they did as good a job as they could do at making that provide the exact balance of electrolytes that a horse needs. But yeah, if they're drinking it all down or eating it all at one time, that's fine, but they don't get any more till the next day. Because yeah,
Okay.
you could definitely give them a good case of diarrhea with overdoing the sodium.
Okay, great.
Same thing true with salt blocks. Some young horses especially will get into really licking on those salt blocks and give themselves a good osmotic diarrhea from it.
My horse likes to eat his salt blocks, so he cannot have them any longer because he literally ate one in a matter of a couple days and then wouldn't stop peeing for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like he was like flooding his stall. So yeah, no more salt blocks for him.
Yeah, some of them you just have to control it because they just are really way too into it. Sometimes the Himalayan ones are a little harder, and sometimes a little work out better for horses that are overeating the salt. So that's sometimes a good alternative.
Do feeds have enough salt in them? Like, because my local vet told me not to top dress, that he probably really didn't need it. He may have just been bored and that's why he was eating his salt. But
yeah, and it may just be some people, like are always eating French fries and potato chips because they like the salt. So yeah. So yeah, you can definitely just find them the good electrolyte source and then just feed what it says to feed on it on a daily basis. And again, if he's not sweating at all, if he's not going out and working hard, then probably his usual food will provide enough.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so TPRs, what are normal and resting and working rates? So a temperature of a horse at rest should be between 99 and 100.5. So after walking for 30 minutes, it's going to go up somewhere between 100, 101. After trotting, it's going to go to 100 to 102. After galloping, you're usually 102, 103, maybe 103 and a half. Anytime the temperature exceeds 103 and a half, you're kind of you're into a situation of an overheated horse and you need to go ahead and rapidly cool it with cold water. Anything over 105, you need to do rapid cooling with cold water, maybe even using alcohol to sponge them down with alcohol to cool them, and you probably ought to get a veterinarian there because there's something wrong with that horse. And anytime you're cooling a horse down, you should cool it down until the temperature is below 101. So that's kind of your temperatures. The one thing I can say about temperatures are not going to change with your conditioning. They're still going to have these same temperatures whether you've got a fit horse or a non-fit horse, because it's just the amount of heat that's generated from making a horse work. Now, certainly as a horse develops better and better sweating, because as we all know, when you first start out at the beginning of a year, you're not acclimated to heat and humidity as much when you're exercising, and you tend to sweat more. But once a horse is acclimated and is kind of gotten into the good sweating, then they should be able to, have these kind of temperatures without any problem. But you're not going to see it improve from day to day or week to week with your schedule. You're still going to be seeing these kinds of temperatures. So you just have to be aware. What we're looking for by doing the temperature after we exercise a horse is, again, are they getting overheated? And then you have to change your program so that they're not overheating. Or is there something wrong with your horse, in which case it might be running that higher fever and you need to figure out why. So these could be points that are telling you not really whether your horse is fit or not, but whether your horse is having some sort of difficulty with the fitness program. Okay, we can change it. Heart rate. Maximum heart rate for a horse is 230 to 260. somewhere there. Anaerobic is going to be somewhere around the 150. They say up to 170. I think most horses are pretty much into anaerobic by 100 over 150. Unless you're talking about maybe about a really, really fit type thoroughbred that might be able to go a little higher before they hit that anaerobic threshold. And that's where they change from making energy using the Krebs cycle and using all of that wonderful oxygen coming in into using a lactic acid cycle where they're producing a lot of lactic acid because of the way they're now producing the energy without oxygen. So at rest, a heart rate should be between 25 and 40. Again, the more athletic the horse is, the lower the heart rate will be at rest. So your really, really good athletic thoroughbreds are going to be down in the 20s. Your, less athletic ponies and maybe some of your really cold-blooded horses may be upwards into the upper 30s at rest. After walking for and also remember, anytime you go to take a horse's heart rate, remember to stand there and listen to it for a minute or so, because the horse may have, as we always call it, the white coat syndrome. Anytime they see stethoscopes, they get a little nervous and they may jump their heart rate up for a few minutes and then bring it back down. So always make sure that the horse is relaxed and quiet and not at all upset when you're taking that resting heart rate. After walking for 30 minutes, the heart rate will be somewhere around 50 to 75, unless you've been walking up and down some really steep hills or something like that. After trotting, you're going to be in the low hundreds. After cantering, you're going to be up in the mid to upper hundreds. And after galloping, you're going to be upwards in the upper hundreds to low 200s. And so that's going to be, and again, that's not going to change that much with fitness. What you're looking for when you're looking at that daily fitness, or not daily, but when you're checking the heart rate on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, when you're doing those conditioning days, what you're going to be looking for is that you don't want to see it go trending upward. That may mean that there's been an injury or something that's not showing that the horse is improving his fitness as you're going along. And so what you want to see is it staying the same or maybe dropping down slightly. So maybe after trotting for 30 minutes, your horse was sitting at about 125 and now he's dropped down to 118 or 115. That would be improved fitness. You're not going to expect him to go from 125 down to 75 or anything like that. That's never going to happen. So what you're just looking for is that slight improvement of maybe heart rate 5, maybe 10 beats slower than it was when you first started your fitness program. After a few weeks of work, that they might be getting that little bit better. But certainly you're not going to expect any kind of a big change in the heart rate. Okay, go ahead. Respiratory rate. Okay, big things with respiratory rate. It should never exceed heart rate. That's called inversion, and that is indicating that your horse is in distress. So anytime you see that respiratory rate is exceeding heart rate, you need to stop exercising, cool the horse down, and then figure out what's going on, because there's probably something wrong with the horse's health at that point. So you may need to get a veterinarian in there to help you figure out. The second thing we need to understand about respiratory rate is coupled with the strides of the canter. There's something called the locomotor respiratory coupling. That means that every time a horse takes a stride at the canter, he has one breath, and he never changes that unless he's holding his breath. And he can do that. They usually do that when they're jumping or when they're doing something really difficult. They may hold their breath, or maybe when they're trying to buck you off or something like that, they could hold their breath. But otherwise, every time a horse takes a stride, he takes a breath. So usually there's a 1 to 4 ratio with heart rate. So 10 breaths for 40 heartbeats at rest is normal, and increasing with work, it may go to a 1 to 2 ratio. So that might be maybe 60 breaths for 120 heart rate, something like that. Certainly, it's going to vary with terrain, ambient conditions, things like that. As I said, at rest, they should be in that 8 to 16 respiratory rate. After walking, they're going to be like 20 to 40. After trotting for a while, they're going to be like 35 to 70. And then when they start cantering, everything will depend on the strides per minute. So if he's cantering at 350 meters per minute with an 18-foot stride, he will take 64 breaths. He has to take 64 breaths per minute because he's taking 64 strides per minute at 350 meters per minute with an 18-foot stride. If we change that to 450 meters per minute with that same 18-foot stride, he will now have 84 breaths per minute. If it's at 500, then he's going to do 100 breaths per minute. If he's now, let's go back down to 450 meters per minute, but now he only has a 14-foot stride. Okay, he has to take more strides to make that 450 meters every minute. So now he's going to take 107 strides per minute, 107 breaths per minute. So you have to really figure it out. If you know how long your horse's galloping or cantering stride is, and you know how fast you're going, then you will know exactly how many breaths per minute he will be taking, because he has no choice but to take that. And that's a really important thing to understand, is why a pony coming off cross country, if they're going, let's say 400 meters per minute, is going to have to be breathing faster when he finishes cross country than a big thoroughbred. He has to. He has no choice, because if they're both going the same speed and the thoroughbred has a longer stride, he will take less breaths in the same cross country course as the pony did. And so you have to understand that. That's really important. Okay, go on to the next one. Bridget, hello. Uh-oh, have we lost Bridget? Bridget, are you there? Uh-oh. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Uh-oh, Bridget's gone. I'm the host now. Okay. Well, let's go back to our, let's see, slideshow. Oh, let's see here. Okay, there we go. Oh no. Are you there, Bridget?
I believe that I'm back.
Okay.
I spaced out there for a minute. I don't know what that was about. So are you, and we're on to the recovery rate slide. I think that's what was
Yes.
next.
That's the one
Okay.
that's next.
Not screen sharing. I don't know why. Hold on. Okay, are we good?
Okay, so when we talk about recovery rates, what we want to see is a recovery rate that's for respiratory and heart rates, we want to be down by 50% in 10 minutes and back to normal within 30 minutes. So that's what you're going to be looking to see that those horses do after the whatever kind of work you've done. Anything that takes longer than 30 minutes or has not decreased by 50% in 10 minutes indicate that the horse was not fit for the level of work done, or that the horse is ill or injured. And so you have to kind of figure out which one of those might be the situation. remember that the rectal temperatures are going to rise in the first 5 to 10 minutes post-exercise and then return to normal within an hour. And that's just because the heat buildup in the muscles will continue to occur for that first 5 to 10 minutes after they've stopped exercising. And then respiratory rates and rectal temperatures will not go down with improved fitness, but heart rate may decrease some, but not a lot. So again, you're not going to be expecting the respiratory and rectal temperatures to change as much as you're going to expect that the heart rate might improve. But what you will be looking for is recovery times should be improving every time every time you check it. And a single day is not as important as a trend. So if you're checking them every day, then you may see that they may not improve as much one day to the next. But if you look at the whole week, they may be showing a definite sign of improvement. So what we're going to look for is recovery times, not individual respiratory or individual heart rate decreases. Okay, go ahead. So let's go from, instead of doing this, let's go to the HB schedule, because that one is what we're really looking at here. So that should be I think that's like 4 or 5 slides from now. Yeah, keep going, keep going. Okay, we'll just keep going until you find the one that says HB. Okay, HB scenario. Here we go. Okay, we have a 10-year-old Lusitano cross gelding. He weighs 1,250 pounds. He's a body condition score of 6. So he's been off from work since the end of main hunt season, which was in the end of November. He still has a half-day turnout unless it's really nasty. And now it's 1st of March, and I want to have him ready to start taking lessons and prepare to do lessons and compete beginner novice later on in the summer. So let's go to the next one. So we're going to start with this first weekly, they have the HB. So the first day is going to be a conditioning day. It's going to be long, slow distances. We're going to walk them under saddle for 30 minutes. We're going to do flat to gentle sloping terrain. And then before we'll do some 5-minute passive core exercises. So that might be some belly lifts and some carrot stretches and some tail tucks before we ever start for 5 minutes. Then the next day, Monday, we're going to school. We're going to walk in the ring. We're going to work on walk halt transitions, 20-meter circles and serpentines for 30 minutes. The next day, we're going to do, again, conditioning, long, slow distance, 45 minutes of walking, and passive core exercises. Then on Wednesday, we're going to do another day of schooling. We're going to do some walk cavaletti, and we're going to use both straight parallel poles and fan set poles to work on that walk, to make them do some lifting of the legs as well as some stretching of the stride by using the parallel, or maybe by using the fan set poles. And we're also going to work on some walk halt transitions and rainbacks. Then Thursday, back to long, slow distances again. We're going to increase up to 50 minutes. Maybe do a little bit more slope. And that's the day I'm going to do his PNR. That's right at the end of doing that 50-minute walk. Friday is his rest day, but he still gets his 5 minutes of passive core exercises, which he loves because he likes getting treats to do them. And then Saturday, we're going to do 30 minutes. We're going to start out with walk trot with 10 minutes of walk using cavaletti poles, and then 1 minute of trot in each directions with transitions, and then 5 minutes of walks using shapes or poles, and then 1 minute trot each direction using shapes. When I talk about using shapes, I'm talking about doing circles, serpentines, half circles, things like that. And then 10 minutes of walk to finish. Okay, and we'll go to week 2. And again, you can see we're doing the long, slow distance. We're going to continue to increase the amount of small hills. We're going to do schooling, same as week 1. Then we're moving up to 60 minutes on the 3rd day of that week. And then we'll do 45 minutes of schooling but we're going to do a little bit of trot in each direction now. We're going to start doing some schooling at trot. And then Thursday, again, we're going to do that conditioning day, and we're going to do our P&R. And if recovery is good, we're going to add intervals on the next conditioning day. If our recovery is not as good as we'd like, then we're going to continue doing our long, slow distances. Again, he gets that 1 day of rest, and then on Saturday, he's going to do, again, his 45 minutes of walk trot, starting out with the 10 minutes of walk to warm him up, then doing some cavaletti pulls, 2 minutes of trot in each direction instead of the 1 minute that we did before. And then we'll cool down with the 10 minutes of walk. Okay, and then we go to the next week. And then by now you can kind of get what the idea is. And so we're going to be looking for improved stamina, reduced heart and respiratory rates slightly, and moderately shortened recovery times. After week 5, I'm going to start adding some this was for the other one where we add the second level test movements, and we might add some schooling days out in hilly terrain to add more strength. We could repeat cavalettis and have some of them be raised at one end or the other. And we could also ask for more collection and things like that as we get going on. Okay, we can go to the next one. So how are you going to track the horse's progress? You're going to do pulse and respirations, evaluate immediately after the last interval set on conditioning days or after your long, slow distance, if that's all you're doing. Repeat it at 5-minute intervals while cooling out. And they will pulse and respiratory rates. Remember, those are going to go up if your speed and intensity of exercise increases. So 1 week, if you're only doing walk trot work, your pulse and respiration will be lower when you come off of it than on the next week, where maybe you add that 1 minute of canter, the 30 seconds of canter. So you always have to realize that you may not see the pulse and respiratory rates go down if your exercise intensity increases. But what we should see is the recovery continues to meet the goals. And again, that was talking about, if you have I was going to use a heart rate monitor because I use the heart riding tracker app on the phone, and I use my 5-minute cool down goals will be a heart rate less than 120, respiratory rate less than 100. 10-minute cool down goals will be a heart rate less than 100, respiratory rate less than 60. And I should be at normal resting rates within 30 minutes. And I'd like to start seeing that approach 20 minutes as my plan goes on and on. So remember that as speeds increase, heart rate and respiratory rate will be higher. Improved recovery rate will be the measure of your fitness. If speeds are unchanging, heart rate might be a slight bit lower if all other factors stay the same. Respiratory rates, again, if you're cantering, will stay the same because you're cantering and galloping and you have that locomotor respiratory coordination. So, okay, the next one. Okay, and then this is talking about different plan scenarios. And again, this is more for the HA, but rehabilitation plans are likely going to be longer because the horse is going to be, you're going to be more concerned about re-injury. And most rehab plans are 1 month of rehab for every month of rest that the horse has had during the time he was off. So you're going to start out usually in hand or under saddle walking for a month or more, and then you should have planned veterinary exams during that rehab period. plans that are used in preparation for extreme events like 3 days, races, endurance rides, polo cross tournaments, and all that should utilize the techniques of peakering and tapering. And you would show how you would prepare the horse with progressive loading during the first 7 weeks of the plan. And then during week 7, you would be performing at the speeds and distance required for the event. But then during week 8, you might be tapering back to maintain the fitness, but allow the horse to have some rest and relaxation prior to the event. And again, periodic veterinary exams during these things, if you're preparing for that extreme event, would be really important to those horses. Fitting up the fat or thin horse would take a slower progression with large quantity of long, slow distances to rebuild the musculature and strengthen the skeleton provided prior to starting the horse in more intense work. It may take you 2 to 3 months prior to starting to use that cardiorespiratory conditioning, like interval training. You may just be doing 2 to 3 months of long, slow distances, because again, if that horse is really fat, you're going to have the fact that he may injure himself, and also has probably got very poor cardiovascular type fitness. If he's really thin, then you know he doesn't have the muscling yet to really be able to do a lot, and it's going to be really hard on his joints because his muscles are not going to be there to support the joints, and because also the heart is also a muscle. We got to figure that the horse's heart is in a good condition if the horse is really thin. So we're going to need to allow that horse to develop through using our dietary plan and then a very slow progression so that these can be successful. Any horse that has any kind of ailment like heaves, myopathies, PPID, which is also known as Cushing's, insulin dysregulation, that's metabolic disease, those are going to have very specialized plans with veterinary supervision to avoid problems. Okay, we can go to the next one. So in conclusion, you got to be sure your plan is correct for your certification standard. And that's the biggest thing I can tell people with this HB standard is make sure it's that unfit horse to daily normal riding. Set your goal, define your horse and any limitations, choose the exercises you want to do, because you don't have to do the exact ones I did. There's other ways of doing it. Define the nutrition. So in other words, say what the horse is eating at the beginning and when during that plan you're going to make changes and what kind of changes you're going to make. Choose the method of monitoring, whether it be a stethoscope or a heart rate monitor or just plain old fingers and watching. Make sure that it's practical, logical, and not too intense so you don't have injury. And then begin the conditioning plan, and always be aware that you may have complications or delays, and you need to be very quick to adjust to the plan as needed so you can meet your goal. So I think that's everything. And is there any questions? And good resources for these are the Conditioning the Sport Horse by Hillary Clayton. That's always an excellent book to read if you really want to understand more. The USPC manuals has really good information. There's another one that Hillary Clayton wrote about activating your horse's core, which has got a lot of these exercises for core development. The Horse Magazine has great articles. If you're in Pony Club, you have access to those articles. And as you see, there's a whole bunch of different ones that you can find. That was me just looking on the Horse Magazine, which you can access through, I think it's called Horse IQ or something IQ through the resource pages for HB and HA. And then there's United States Pony Club National Examiners are happy to help you. And we do have a program that I think is really important for you all to know about, where you can submit your plan before you're testing, well before you're testing, not right before, but well before you're testing, have a national examiner look over it and give you pointers on how to make sure that it may meet standards. So if you want to have that done, you just have to get your plan done ahead of time. You submit it through the national office, and then they will send it to one of the national examiners, and we'll look it over and then get back to you directly about what you could do to make sure that everything is up to par. And I think that's everything. So, anybody have any questions?
I think I asked all of my questions during, so I'm
Okay.
good.
And if at any point, Bridget, if any point anybody, you should, anybody who looks at this, at the recording of it, if they have any questions, they're welcomed always to contact me or one of the other national examiners. We would be more than happy to help you out on making sure that, everybody has all of the resources they need to pass this.